Hey everybody, my name's Sunny. I want to tell you how I got disappointed in people at a party. To be exact, it's about my best friends, for whom I was ready for anything. I knew well that my friends were not so wealthy as me. I mean, my parents are rich. I just spent their money, but I tried not to be too cocky. And until now, I sincerely believed I was succeeding. At school, I wasn't particularly sociable or nice to other people. Kids around me weren't role models at all, because already in high school, they began to see the girls as, well, a commodity or a bargaining chip. Very expensive, elite, and thoroughbred, if you can say so about the coin. Since I was a smart girl and somehow managed to finish school with honors, I really tried my best. And it wasn't because of connections like everyone else. My parents decided that we would enter a college. Yeah. I entered the college honestly again. I passed the exams like everyone else. And even there, when I was about to start my studies at college, I decided to conduct an experiment. Try to be a normal student, not a kid with a silver spoon in my mouth. My parents agreed for some reason. They only said I wouldn't be allowed to live in the dorms, but we were able to arrange for a studio apartment near the college. The price was just a penny and cozy enough to live in comfortably. Well, my parents bought it for me, along with all the other apartments on the floor. But there's no need to say this, right? This is how my independent student life began. In the morning, I went to university. Then I did my homework in the library. And in the evening, I went back to my apartment and watched TV or just freaked out, listening to my favorite music. That depended on my mood. About a month later, I got a new, interesting, and fun group of fellow students around me. We went to parties together, hung out after classes, and did all sorts of essays and projects. Over time, I started to see these people as my friends that I never had before. I had no restrictions for my friends, and somehow I didn't notice how the parties moved from the dorm to my apartment. And I paid for drinks, food, and everything else out of my own pocket. Anyway, I paid all the time, and they were usually embarrassed, or they tried to dissuade me. In fact, I understand this now, but then I was so happy I could help my friends. On my birthday, we all went to the islands for a week. At my expense, of course, even though my dad tried to say it wasn't the best idea. I thought he wanted to start playing old songs about searching for your friends in your social circle again, and I just hushed up the conversation. Expensive gifts? No problem. To pay for medicines? No worries. Helping to organize an early engagement for a couple from the group, and as a result, paying for everything from my own pocket? Done. But the funny thing is that I still continued to sincerely believe no one knew anything, and that I was just an ordinary student. Though, in my opinion, even the college cats already guessed about my financial situation. This was the last party, at the end of the year. Of course, we celebrated at my apartment, and that had already become a tradition. At some point, I felt bad and decided to lay down on the couch, watching TV. And I sort of blacked out, but not completely. At least my ears were working perfectly. And what I heard helped me to immediately come to my senses. As soon as my friends made sure I was asleep, as it probably seemed from the outside, the fun quickly started. They were hanging out, couples were squeezing each other and discussing me. Girls climbed into my closet and started trying on my outfits, criticizing my taste, my ability to choose clothes, my shape. Although I had a normal figure and a pretty face, the guys didn't fall behind. They washed all my bones. I found out I was a cocky posh who constantly poked her money at everyone, and that no guy would ever volunteer to date me unless it was for money. Some even offered to make fun of me, undress me while I was supposedly inadequate, take a picture and upload it on the net, somewhere in the college Facebook group, so that everyone could see what I really was. But fortunately, this idea was cut down in its beginning, because who would then throw money and pay for the cool parties? I quote, I mean, all this time, I thought I had friends. I was happy to help them with everything they needed, and they saw me just as a stupid, terrible wallet with legs. For them, I was disgusting to be around. But hey, money doesn't smell, right? Anyway, I secretly called my dad and asked him to send his guards to my house. And then, after my command, they were already in the hallway. I got up and went to the wrangles. I freaked out, of course. I even tried to scratch someone's eyes out. And then my dad's big men just pushed everyone outside. As they were. Some of them were even naked, because by that time, they were already drunk. I know it's ugly, but honestly, what about them in this case? I have at least a one-time thing happen because of my emotions, and they mocked me behind my back for 1.5 years. So the remorse and conscience didn't eat me. I don't know where I screwed up. Maybe I really shouldn't show my money like that. Or was my dad right, that I needed to communicate with people in the same social circle to avoid such things?
Hi, guys and gals. My name is Ashley, and today I'll tell you a story of how I managed to unravel a real maniac's mystery. 2 months ago, a very strange guy began stalking me. I've noticed him for the first time when I was returning home from the university. A stranger in a black jacket and cap stood at the university's gates. When I left the building, he followed me and traced me back to my very house. At first, I thought I just read one detective story too many. But the next day, the situation repeated itself. The guy in black was literally breathing down my neck. I saw him everywhere, silently following me. When I looked around, I always saw him standing somewhere nearby. Naturally, I told my best friend about it. She, however, said that there was no maniac. I must have met the same passerby several times, and all the subsequent conclusions were just the products of my overactive imagination. My friend advised me to stop watching horror movies and reading creepy stories to sleep. After our conversation, I felt a bit better. For the first time in several weeks, I breathed a sigh of relief. For some time, I really believed that it had just been my imagination and nothing else. Later on that day, I was returning home, entering the porch, and suddenly I saw the very guy in the black cap right in front of me. I wanted to run away, but he grabbed my hand and began to unfasten his jacket. Fear gave me strength, so I kicked him with my foot, broke free, and ran to my apartment. I quickly locked the door behind me and stood there for several minutes, listening. I was afraid that he wanted to ambush me again, but the porch was quiet. On the same day, I wrote a statement to the police. The officers offered to compose an identity kit of a maniac. Unfortunately, I remembered only his black cap and sharp chin. The police had no info about the assailant, so they couldn't catch him. He was roaming free, and that was what really drove me nuts. My parents bought me a pepper spray. Dad saw me off and met me at the university, but I knew I could no longer feel safe while that guy was free. This could not go on any longer. I stopped going out, didn't go to the university, refused to answer the calls from friends. I was even too scared to come to the window. I was sure that the guy in the black was camping somewhere near my house. I knew that sooner or later I'd still meet him. But one morning, Dad came into my room and offered to take me to self-defense courses. His friend was a mentor there. Initially, I wanted to refuse him and stay home, but Mom persuaded me to go there. Dad was trying his best to help me, so I might as well try these courses. An hour later, I was at the gym. I thought that it was my first and last visit there. And when the lesson began, I've got an impression that it was a SWAT team training. Yeah, it was that hard. I've barely managed to handle 15 minutes of this hell. Then I decided to flee and headed for the exit. I've already felt freedom, but an instructor suddenly appeared in front of me and said that the lesson had not yet ended. An hour of torture followed. I barely remembered it. But after class, the instructor came to talk to me personally and even praised me. Only then I noticed that he was a nice guy with a wide smile. He introduced himself as David and invited me to the next lesson. He was talking so convincingly that I didn't even manage to refuse him. So I started attending the self-defense courses. And in a few weeks, I felt much calmer and confident. Sport made me both physically and mentally stronger, and soon I told my dad not to come pick me up after the lesson. I was so tired of being afraid. I really wanted to overcome my fear. But when I left the gym, I immediately felt that someone was following me. I started to panic and wanted to immediately run away. But in a few moments, I somehow managed to pull myself together. I turned around the corner, felt the pepper spray in my pocket, and waited. As soon as the stranger who was following me turned around the corner, I jumped out of my hiding place and sprayed him right in the eye. I was incredibly disappointed when I saw that I sprayed David. My instructor admitted that he guarded me, but he certainly did not expect me to set up an ambush. David began to escort me home after each lesson. At first, he claimed that my dad asked him to do so, but soon I realized that he just liked me. And frankly speaking, I harbored some feelings for David as well. Besides, I really enjoyed hanging out with him. I felt confident and protected when he was next to me. Soon we started dating. I got seriously interested in sports, and training no longer seemed like a hellish trial to me. I even resumed my studies at the university and met with friends again. My life was getting better. But one evening when David and I had a walk at the park, I suddenly noticed a familiar figure. It was the same guy in black. This time, however, I saw him first. I ran to David, who was just getting us some ice cream. But when we returned to the place where I noticed the maniac, the guy disappeared. My boyfriend calmed me down and said that he would track down the stranger and deal with him. We began to come to the place where I saw the guy in black more often, and in a few days, I saw him there once again. David and I decided to follow him. The maniac was heading to the forest park, carrying a big bag with him. The stranger wandered around the alleys for a long time, searching for a deserted place. Finally, he stopped near a bench and opened his bag. We honestly didn't expect him to take an easel and paints out of it. Our maniac turned out to be just a street artist. David wanted to immediately go up to him and talk, but I stopped my boyfriend because I wanted to observe the situation a little bit more. I was intrigued. The stranger's face seemed painfully familiar to me. But suddenly, two guys ran up to the artist. One of them hit our stranger on the head, and the other grabbed his bag. David immediately ran after the robbers, and I rushed to the guy in black who laid unconscious near the bench. I feared for his life, so I called the ambulance on the spot. The artist turned out to have a concussion, and they put him in the hospital. David and I visited our stranger the next morning. When the artist saw me, he got scared. I asked him why he had been following me earlier, but he didn't answer and just gestured to his jacket, which was on a hanger nearby. With a gesture, the stranger asked me to take out a pen and notebook from the inner pocket of the jacket and bring those to him. Then, the man took out a pen and wrote, "I am your brother." I immediately wanted to leave. You see, I was fed up with mysteries and lies and didn't believe him in the slightest. But David asked me to calm down in order to figure out everything. The stranger introduced himself as James. He told me that he was my twin, but the parents left him in the hospital because he was born mute. James spent his whole life in an orphanage, but always believed that his parents would return for him. And when he grew up, he decided to track down his relatives and asked why they'd abandoned him. That evening, I told my parents James's story, but they accused him of lying and assured that I was the only child in the family. Father even said James belonged in prison and asked me to stay away from him. Actually, I too could not believe that all this time I had a brother. But at the same time, I felt like my parents omitted something from me. I shared my suspicions with David, and he said that it was time to sort all these things out. In the morning, I took my birth certificate. David and I went to the maternity hospital where I had been born. I got access to an account book and all the documents from those years. We studied everything carefully, and I couldn't believe my eyes. James didn't lie. He really was my brother. That same evening, I broke up with my parents and left home. I could not forgive them for leaving my brother in an orphanage. Besides, they did so just because he was born mute. How could you abandon a child so easily? There was no excuse for their action. Since then, I moved into David's place. We visit James in the hospital every day. He wrote to me about his childhood, about how he loved to draw his parents, whom he'd never seen. James was a talented child. Right after the boarding school, he became an art student. Somehow, James managed to find out where our parents lived, but he still did not dare to approach them. Therefore, my brother wanted to talk to me first. That evening, when he followed me into the porch, he actually reached for his notebook and a pen, but I got scared, kicked him, and ran away. James was quickly recovering, and the doctors promised to set him free in a few days. Each visit, I brought him a new notebook and pens, and he wrote me more about his life. My brother turned out to be very interesting and a bright person, and I still could not forgive my parents for abandoning him. One morning, David came into James's ward and told him that he had visitors. I had no idea who it could be, but suddenly, I saw my tearful parents. I quickly got out of the ward, leaving my parents and brother alone. That was their first meeting in 20 years. After the meeting, Mom and Dad came up to me and we hugged one another close. I finally decided to make peace with my parents and tried to forgive them. All of us knew that our life could never be the same as before. After all, Mom and Dad had a new son now, and I had a new brother. Of course, we still needed a lot of time and patience in order to become a real family, but I believe in our success. After all, the main thing is that we found each other, so as never to lose each other again.
Hello, my name is Alicia, and I want to share my real story how I worked part-time in a dental office. Faint-hearted ones, please stock up on the sedatives. When I entered a medical college, I didn't even know who I wanted to be. Back then, I was 17, and like all teenagers, I saw only a white coat, respect of mythical parents, and my heroic face. But in fact, I didn't know anything about the future profession, or about the branch I should choose. I don't know if it's like this everywhere, or I just got lucky, but in the first year, we weren't divided into different specializations. This is a time to analyze and think about your strengths and weaknesses, and get to know your profession as well, in order not to get stuck into a stupid situation. Like, for instance, you're afraid of blood, but for some reason you're going to study surgery. By cut and dry method, I realized I wanted to become a dentist. Minimal risks, maximum gratitude, and a private practice, which can be outside a hospital. For example, you can make a dentist office literally in your own home, or rent some office and equip it as you need. Cosmetologists can also use this advantage. But other people's acne, unlike cavities, didn't inspire me at all. I wanted to finally make sure this thing was for me, so I decided to get an internship in a dental office. Well, not really to get practice, rather as a cleaner, but just to look at this from the inside. They accepted me for this excellent position with a beautiful name assistant, even without a medical education. And I already had a whole course behind me, so the dentist shook my hand, gave me a dressing gown and a mask, and sent me to wash the floors without any talking. And I started working. I washed, cleaned up, kept all sorts of things in the patients' mouths. When the doctor needed extra hands, I wore different gloves after washing my hands first, of course. I didn't notice any catch, just a lot of hard work. Not harder and not worse than other jobs, only people yelled more often here. They started to trust me so much that they trained me to prepare some drugs and solutions by myself. For example, for pain medication. You may say, why prepare this when it's sold in ampules? So yes, only in our office the pain medication was bought in large spray bottles. Like, you just spray and that's it, frozen. In theory. And the catch was that my boss was saving money. He opened the vial in advance, poured part of the solution into another container, and added normal saline solution. Once I asked why he didn't add water, and he explained that the reactions in the composition shouldn't be mixed with water, but the saline solution fits great. And it costs, in contrast to the pain medication, a penny. At first, I didn't notice the difference, being naive. Well, he diluted the medicine, so what? Yes, it's saving. But anyway, you need to pour a certain amount of the solution on one tooth. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. And then, I got it. If a kid or a young girl was brought into the office, the doctor took a special gas for pain relief. But the men got that economical spray. And men what? That's right, they don't scream. Well, they shouldn't technically, because they're taught like that. If it hurts, keep it inside or you're not a man. Another nonsense, but this was definitely not my business. But men really endured the pain. Even if in tears and snot are flowing, They only cling to the chair and endured. So the global savings on painkillers was discovered. The doctor simply imitated anesthesia on men, and then he performed the operation practically without it. Well, because part of the drug still remained, although in a much lower concentration. Barbaric thing, yeah. I once asked why the doctor was doing this, and he just spread his hands and said that there's actually no reason. He likes people to writhe in pain. And then he added that many doctors do this, and everyone has their own reasons. Someone, for example, doesn't use pain medication for life lessons. Someone thinks that he does everything quite comfortably also without freezing. After that, I left the office because, well, that's it. I'm done with this. So I left, but the fear remained. This thought revolved in my head constantly, that my ex-boss isn't the only idiot who does this, and that at any moment you can come across such a moron. And most important, you won't be able to identify him, because when all the people say that everything's all right, you believe it, and think the problem is in you and not in the doctor. Let me explain. My ex-boss had a great reputation. People recommended him to each other, mainly women and kids, for whom he didn't spare medication. But the men were either silent if they're honest, or praised him because they thought it was their fault that they were hellishly hurt. Some even came back. And it worked like this everywhere. It's called the crowd effect. And how then do you choose a really good doctor? Where to get the confidence that your surgeon or traumatologist doesn't indulge in something like this, and you won't suddenly wake up during a tough operation? This is damn scary. So freaking scary. I didn't give up my studies. In my second year, I chose dentistry as I wanted. My dream is to graduate and become the best doctor in the city, and be exceptionally honest with my patients. And at the same time, I'm already looking at the guys I'm studying with regarding their professional suitability. I write the names of some in a book, so that later I have my own doctor. And now, I'm just trying not to get sick, because even a routine examination makes me panic. I think you'd understand me if you'd experienced something like that. If you don't feel safe, it's almost impossible to be treated and to recover.
Hi, my name's Kelly. I'm 12 years old, and I have everything I want. I live in California in a chic house. In my wardrobe, beautiful, expensive dresses from fashion designers. Everything that I ask, they immediately buy me, be it expensive jewelry or a mobile phone of the latest model. The thing is that I earn money with myself and my body that many adults have never dreamed of, and I've been doing it since I was 8 years old. Want to know how I achieved this? To begin with, I'm biracial. My mom is Korean, and my dad is American. They met at a youth music festival, fell in love, got married, and as a result, me. As my mother and father told me, from a very young age, even when I was a baby, everyone admired how beautiful I was. I took all the best from my parents. My eye color is from my mother. The shape of my eyes is from my father. The thick black hair of my mother. And the correct small nose is from my father. Doll. That is what I was called not only by my relatives and friends, but by everyone around me. My parents were often told that I should be sent to some modeling agency because my appearance is unique. But they only smiled at all persuasion and advice and shook their heads negatively. And when the adults asked about the reason for such a sharp refusal, Mom and Dad answered, if they send me to a modeling agency, they will take away my childhood. But they really wanted me to be an ordinary child who spends time playing games with her friends, goes to school, does ballet or some kind of sport. I didn't understand anything then, and I also just smiled and was embarrassed when the adults complimented me. Everything changed one day. My father's company was having a Halloween party. We were invited by the whole family. My parents dressed in historical costumes of a married couple from England in the 19th century, and I was dressed up as a doll. My face and hands were made up with white porcelain. Funny elastic curls were wound around my head, and I wore a beautiful dress. and Dad made a cardboard box for me with his own hands. I must say that at 8, I was very short and very thin. Therefore, Dad, along with a box, easily lifted me. Dad brought me to the party, as if he was carrying someone a present, with a festive shiny ribbon. And how much everyone was surprised when the doll turned out to be alive, and in response to their greeting too, answered, "Hello." I really liked the attention. Even sometimes, they seemed to start me up, and I danced funny dances to the applause of guests and my parents' friends. At the end of the evening, when I finally broke up with my cardboard house, a beautiful woman came to my mother. She introduced herself as a wife of one of my father's colleagues and said she was creating a children's clothing collection. She complimented our family costumes, especially my puppet look. But the main reason that Mrs. Johnson came to us was that she really wanted to invite me to take pictures of her new collection of clothes. The theme of the collection was Puppet World, and I fit perfectly with my appearance and growth. Mom thanked the woman for the offer and promised to think about it. They were discussing some other adult issues of their own, and I really thought about how cool it is when you are smartly dressed in a beautiful dress, and you are photographed from all sides. When we got home, I honestly told my mother that I would really like to know what a photo shoot is, and to attend it. Not to say that my parents spoiled me, but they almost always complied with my requests. Soon, I found out that they agreed to shoot. I was so glad. I constantly asked my mother, "Well, when is the day of the photo shoot? I have been waiting for this day." On the platform, which was decorated as a dollhouse, there were other girls and boys with me. They were all very beautiful too. But I noticed that both Mrs. Johnson and the photographer paid special attention to me. I was very proud of myself. The photographer continued to say how perfect my appearance was for a model, but my mother only shook her head. I didn't understand then. Well, what did she not like? I, on the contrary, really enjoyed photos, changing clothes, doing makeup like adult models. We were there all day, but I wasn't tired at all. I met new friends. Before going to bed, when my mother read me a fairy tale, I asked her to agree to additional shoots if the photographer called me again. And Mom agreed. And for shooting advertisements for children's medical centers, and for shooting for a catalog of children's toys, and for shooting another line of children's clothing. I was sincerely happy. At each photo session, I was surrounded by attention, cared for, deliciously fed, and given gifts. I was a real star. In addition, the photos were also very beautiful. As a photographer said, the camera loves me. Modeling agencies piled up my parents with offers, offering the best conditions, contracts with the coolest brands, filming movies and TV shows, participating in fashion shows of the most famous fashion houses. Then, of course, I didn't understand how much I could cost. But when a couple of years later, we moved to an expensive, huge house in Los Angeles, I understood why many friends and relatives of our family called me a golden child. But it'll be later, at the age of 9. In addition to photography, in my life there were shoots in advertising and cinema, as the agencies promised. I was just torn into pieces. One shoot didn't have time to end, as I learned the script for another role. Although I rarely went to school, I definitely knew that many of my classmates were envious of me. On set, I could easily meet celebrities, take a photo with them, or get an autograph. But it so happened that most often they themselves asked to take a photo with a doll baby, as I was called in fashion industry circles. A few friends turned their backs on me, believing that I had become proud and arrogant. But this wasn't so. I always behaved modestly, respected elders, tried to be sweet and kind to everyone. Of course, with age, my character changed, and the attitude towards others and their work changed. I didn't know what fees my parents received for me, but that I wouldn't ask them. They never refused me. We went to rest abroad, moved to a new house. My mother left work to accompany me everywhere. She also changed. She began to look like a wealthy and knowing woman. In this situation, everyone was happy. Once I was asked to pose for students at the California Institute of Art. Their teacher saw me at one of the shows and decided that my figure and appearance were perfect for painting. It was a new and unusual experience. I stood on a high pedestal in a simple white dress, and about 20 young men and women painted my portraits with concentration over several sessions. Some of them saw me as a forest nymph, someone as a white ghost, and someone as a girl walking along a sunny California beach. Each picture was beautiful. They even promised to give one of them to me. A little later, my parents and I were invited to the opening of the exhibition, where the students' works were presented. Despite the fact that the guys were just studying, their master was a well-known artist throughout America, so the exhibition brought together many distinguished guests and artists. I didn't think that anyone would recognize me, because I was wearing fantasy costumes in the portraits. But that evening, many guests came up to me and gave me compliments. Among them were artists, photographers, and even sculptors, who proposed to me to pose for a painting, to participate in an art photo project, or to become a muse to create a sculpture, because my appearance is perfect. By 12 years old, I can say I have achieved worldwide fame. I went to various countries for shows, participated in thematic photo shoots, and acted in films. My unusual puppet appearance over the years became only more attractive to those around me. Children's facial features were replaced by more feminine ones. It attracted new projects, brands, etc. On the one hand, it's all very interesting. This is what I sincerely love to do. But now I am very tired. Often you have to fly or move somewhere to shoot. I hardly attend school, and of course, I don't think about which university I'll go to after. I don't have friends. I don't fall in love with guys, like many of my peers. I have a schedule, work, and a couple of weekends per month. Now I understand why my parents so wanted to protect me from a modeling career, and why they believed that this work would steal my childhood from me. It happened. I don't remember my childhood at all, or any pranks, games, cycling, funny stories from school, but I remember shooting in a popular series, hundreds of photo shoots and fashion shows in Paris and Milan. If you ask me, do I regret my choice? Then I will definitely answer that I don't regret it. After all, in just 4 years, I was able to earn enough to provide for both me and my parents. But sometimes I think, or maybe I should give it all up. Go back to school, graduate, and become a fashion designer? I don't know. If you were in my place, what would you choose? Finish your modeling career before it's too late? Or continue to work, travel the world, and make money?
Hi, my name is Robert. I am 12 years old, and I'm not quite an ordinary guy. Unfortunately, I wasn't bitten by a radioactive spider, and don't have a super strong skeleton because vibranium is hidden inside me. It's all about the features of my appearance. As far as I can remember, I was always very pale. Even in kindergarten, I noticed that I was slightly different from my friends. My skin was white and almost transparent. It surprised and scared me at the time. And also, my lips. Almost always, they were pale pink, almost white, sometimes even blue. It seemed that I was constantly freezing, even in the summer, but that was not the point at all. Since childhood, my parents took me to doctors, trying to find the cause of my paleness. I was given various diagnoses. They conducted many examinations. They even drove me to some ultra-modern medical center to determine the exact cause of my unusual appearance. When I was very young, it was like an adventure for me. I felt special. The final diagnosis was anemia, a lack of red blood cells, that is, red blood cells in the blood. It is for this reason that from the outside, I resemble a walking corpse. But that is not all. Perhaps because of anemia or because of something else, but it turned out that my skin is very sensitive to sunlight. And when the rest of us enjoyed walking in the summer or relaxing on the beach under the sun, I had to hide under the roof because in good weather and bright sun, I could instantly get burned. Not very fun, right? Perhaps this is why my parents always chose the states and cities where our sun didn't really pamper the locals with their bright light as our place of residence. I was born in Alaska, in the city of Juneau, but due to the work of my father, he is a civil engineer, we were forced to change our place of residence several times, so we ended up in North Dakota. I also had to change school quite often. I barely had time to get used to the teachers and classmates as I had to leave again. Over time, I realized that in my case, it's better not to become attached to anything, so as not to hurt when I leave. My friends were into comics about my favorite superheroes and computer games. Parents understood everything and did not swear at me that I spent all day in my room and did not go out, especially since I studied well. Of course, my appearance has always raised questions from others, especially with my peers. Some were whispering behind me, others, without hiding, were staring at me, and still others were directly asking if I was ill or something. Sometimes I liked to make fun of it and said that yes, I was sick and it was deadly and contagious. You should have seen how they almost jumped away from me. Adults usually looked sympathetically and understandingly. But my new school and local students surprised me like no one before. By 12, I had become a rather reserved and unsociable guy. I had nothing to talk about with guys and girls of my age. I did not plan to make friends. That is why when the teacher introduced me to my new classmates, I did not even smile. I went into the classroom, took the last desk in the last row near the window. I didn't look at anyone. No one said hello to anyone. At the break, I turned on my favorite music in my headphones and played a game on my phone. Of course, after such behavior, no one thought to approach me. That is exactly what I achieved. However, I was too happy too early because with my behavior, I not only provoked a negative reaction, but also interest. Moreover, to a greater extent in girls. Once I lingered in the dining room and heard a conversation. The girls were talking, but not from my class. They discussed a strange guy appeared at school, who does not talk to anyone, does not try to make friends. He walks all the time, sitting on the sidelines. He also has a very unusual appearance. He is pale and always gloomy. The description was very similar to me. I already thought that they were just gossiping, but their next words shocked me. They assumed that by all the described signs, it can be concluded that I am a vampire. I wanted to laugh out loud, but I realized that they would hear. Indeed, judging by their conversation, they definitely did not notice me. Can anyone really seriously believe that vampires exist these days? These girls have definitely revised science fiction films or read too much anime. In any case, I did not continue to listen to this nonsense and returned to class. Once again, I was mistaken into thinking that only a couple of girls supported this crazy idea about a vampire. Soon, in my class, I began to hear similar conversations. A couple of times, I pretended to turn on the music, but actually listened to what was happening around. One of the girls brought an article from the magazine, How to Determine If There Are Vampires Around You. They enthusiastically read the questionnaire questions out loud and agreed with each statement. I could hardly resist rolling my eyes and telling them that they had too rich of an imagination. Conversations at school did not subside. I decided not to argue, being sure that they would soon lose interest in me. So it has been more than once, and not two. At first, in each school, I attracted a lot of attention, and after that, life returned to its usual course. One day, a biology teacher decided to take us on an excursion to the Theodore Roosevelt National Park. As luck would have it, that day the sun came out, spring warming. While my classmates cheerfully parted with their jackets, I pulled my arms lower and hid behind a cap. Of course, after that trip, talk that this strange Robert is also afraid of the sun like a vampire captured almost our entire school. I decided that it would be fun to participate in this game. Therefore, at lunch, I began to bring pomegranate juice or tomato puree to school. You should have seen the eyes of my classmates when I calmly took out a transparent bottle in which something resembling human blood splashed. I even specially ominously smiled and licked my lips. Going to school was definitely fun. I told all my parents about everything, but they only laughed with me, and the next day, they shared that they also gossip about the vampire boy where they work. When the Halloween party was announced, I had no doubt what costume I should choose. It was so obvious that my parents were not surprised at all when I asked them to buy this particular outfit. Together, we chose everything I need to impress. A high collar, a black cloak with a blood red lining, a tuxedo, false fangs, and red lenses. The image of the vampire, or Count Vlad Dracula, has traditionally been one of the most popular at Halloween parties, but the whole school seemed to freeze as I entered the mystically decorated sports hall. Of course, given the shade of my skin and pale lips, the whole image looked as natural as possible in my performance. I felt that all eyes were riveted to me. At some point, even the thought flickered that it would be great to grab the first girl standing next to her and dig into her neck with my fangs. That would be a show. However, the party was pretty boring. I did not plan to dance, just studied the costumes of other guys. Some of them obviously took a lot of money to win the king and queen of the party contest. Who was not there? The Mummy, Iron Man, Hulk, Groot, Captain America, Minions, Chucky dolls, ghosts, zombies. Among such a set of costumes, I did not expect at all that it was my costume that was recognized as the best. I was very embarrassed when they called me to the stage to hand me the crown. The queen of the party was a girl in an Annabelle doll costume. Of course, according to the law of the party, we had to dance a slow dance at the end of the party as the king and queen. We did not break traditions and took our place in the center of the hall. I did not think that the girl would want to talk, but she quickly began to ask me something. I answered in monosyllables, hoping that the conversation would quickly end. And suddenly, among ordinary ones, a question like, "Where did you come from?" and "What do you do in your free time?" she asked me to bite her. In all seriousness, she said that she and many other girls at school knew that I was a vampire, and that they had even argued among themselves because each of them wanted to come to me and offer me to drink their blood. I was shocked. In the end, she added that in fact, they even have a small fan club named after me. They are all in love with the mysterious vampire and dream that I bit them. And then I realized that my game was delayed. I apologized to her, interrupted our dance, and went home. At that moment, I had to seriously think about what to do in this situation. It was no longer funny. Once again, I made a mistake, assuming that my refusal would calm her. She literally began to chase me. I noticed her at the entrance of the school, in the cafeteria, on the football field. When she sat next to me in the school bus, I almost asked the bus driver to stop and urgently let me out. It all looked like some kind of bad movie. But the main surprise was waiting for me ahead. Once, before class, I looked into my locker to get a textbook and saw there a small object that looked like a vial. These usually store drugs or injections, but in this bubble, judging by the color and density, there was no medicine at all, but human blood. And next to it was a note in which my persevering pursuer suggested that I try her to taste, and after that already personally bite her, because she dreams of becoming a vampire. With trembling hands, I removed the vial with blood away, trying not to even think how she was able to collect so much of her own blood. After this incident, I realized that it was time to end with my rally. But I didn't even invent it. Yes, and how to do it now? Put an ad on the blackboard. Hi, I'm Robert, and I'm not a vampire. Somehow stupid, agree? Maybe you will advise me what I should do in this situation. It cannot go on like this anymore, that's for sure. But I would not want to seem like an idiot in front of the whole school. I will be grateful for your advice in the comments. Also, tell me if you liked my story, and share some topics that you would be interested in hearing about in future videos. See ya!